At 11:47 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, 3 separate military command centers, one buried beneath the Alborz Mountains outside Tehran, one hardened inside a defended complex outside Moscow, and one housed within reinforced underground facilities of the PLA Strategic Support Force headquarters in Beijing, executed a synchronized communications protocol that Western signals intelligence had never previously observed at this level of operational intensity. What those 3 commands were coordinating was not a diplomatic communique, not a military exercise, not a show of force. They were coordinating the execution of the most consequential combined military operation in the history of the post-Cold War international order. 1,000 missiles, Iranian ballistic and cruise systems providing the primary strike volume, Russian electronic warfare, and long-range precision assets providing the suppression and penetration architecture, Chinese satellite navigation, targeting data, and strategic communications support providing the nervous system that held the entire operation together across 3 time zones and 2 continents. The target, Israel's military and strategic infrastructure, the air bases, the command centers, the logistics nodes, the port facilities that constitute the operational backbone of the only state in the Middle East capable of projecting force against any member of the coalition now arrayed against it. By the time the last missile impacted, 4 IDF air bases had been rendered non-operational. Israel's national power grid had collapsed across 68% of its territory. The port of Ashdod was burning with fires that would require 3 days to extinguish, and the combined carrier strike groups of the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and USS Gerald R. Ford, positioned in the Eastern Mediterranean specifically to deter exactly this kind of operation, were executing a high-speed withdrawal toward the Atlantic that no Pentagon spokesperson would describe accurately for the next 72 hours. The Western security establishment had a name for this scenario. They called it the nightmare. The convergence of Iranian strike capacity, Russian electronic and precision warfare capability, and Chinese intelligence and space-based support into a single coordinated operational package. They called it impossible because acknowledging its possibility required acknowledging the failure of 30 years of policy designed to prevent it. Last night, the impossible happened. Iran provided the strike volume. The IRGC Aerospace Force contributed approximately 650 of the operation's 1,000 missiles. Imad precision ballistic missiles for high-value fixed target engagement, Hoveze cruise missiles for low-altitude penetration against radar-defended targets, and Shahed 238 jet-powered loitering munitions for terminal phase saturation of interceptor battery positions. Russia provided the suppression architecture. Krasuka, 4 ground-based jamming systems forward deployed to Syrian territory, executed a comprehensive suppression of Israeli radar and communications infrastructure beginning approximately 18 minutes before the first Iranian missile crossed Israeli airspace long enough to degrade Israeli early warning systems meaningfully, short enough to prevent analysts from recognizing it as the opening phase of an imminent strike. Russian precision assets contributed approximately 200 missiles assigned exclusively to the highest priority targets: the Arrow, 3 battery positions, David Sling fire control radars, and underground command bunkers at the Kiria headquarters complex in Tel Aviv. China provided what neither Iran nor Russia could have provided independently. The precision foundation that transformed a large volume strike into a large volume precision strike. BeiDou navigation satellite coverage provided GPS independent guidance for every missile in the package, immune to the American GPS jamming, activated within minutes of the strike's commencement. Chinese reconnaissance satellites supplied final targeting data updates uploaded to Iranian guidance systems in the hours before launch. The result was an operational package qualitatively greater than the sum of its parts. Iran's volume, without Russian suppression, would have faced manageable interception rates. Russian precision, without Iranian volume, would not have generated the comprehensive infrastructure collapse the operation produced. Chinese guidance, without the strike volume of both partners, would have delivered accuracy without the saturation required to overcome defensive capacity. Together, the three contributions created something the Israeli-American defensive architecture had no pre-planned response to: the USS Eisenhower and USS Gerald R. Forward carrier strike groups had been operating in the Eastern Mediterranean for a combined 23 weeks, publicly emphasized as the physical embodiment of American commitment to Israeli security. Their simultaneous withdrawal, executed over approximately 4 hours beginning 90 minutes after the strike commenced, is the single most consequential American military decision of the post-Cold War era. Russian electronic warfare was simultaneously degrading the sensor picture available to American naval vessels, reducing commanders' ability to assess incoming threat volume under time pressure. Iranian anti-ship missile batteries along the Lebanese and Syrian coastlines, whose engagement envelopes covered both carrier groups, were activated simultaneously with the strike's opening. 3 PLA Navy surface combatants in the region took up positions assessed as consistent with providing over-the-horizon targeting support for Iranian anti-ship systems. Both carrier group commanders reached the same conclusion within a 12-minute window: withdrawal. Iran, Russia, and China achieved the displacement of the Mediterranean's most powerful naval force without sinking a ship, without killing a sailor, and without crossing the threshold of direct military engagement with American forces. This is deterrence at its most sophisticated, creating conditions under which the adversary's own force protection logic produces the strategic outcome you require without requiring you to impose it by force. The analytical failure that allowed this partnership to develop undetected reflects an assumption embedded in Western threat assessment for decades that states with different political systems, different cultural traditions, and different specific grievances against the international order cannot develop durable strategic partnerships because their interests are ultimately too divergent to sustain genuine cooperation under pressure. This assumption was always more ideologically convenient than empirically grounded. It allowed the architects of sanctions regimes applied to all three states to believe that economic isolation would produce strategic paralysis rather than strategic innovation. It allowed the designers of deterrence deployments to plan against each state individually, rather than against the combined capabilities their partnership would eventually produce. Iran's contribution to this convergence was the demonstration repeated across 5 decades that a state with sufficient internal cohesion and strategic patience can develop genuine military capability under the most adverse conditions imaginable. Russia's contribution was the demonstration that a major power excluded from the Western-led order has both the motivation and capability to provide technology support that transforms Iranian capability from regionally significant to globally consequential. China's contribution was the demonstration that a state can provide decisive intelligence and navigation support to combined military operations without crossing the threshold of direct military engagement that would expose it to the full weight of American response. The unipolar moment, the period from the Soviet collapse to this morning in which American military primacy was the organizing fact of international relations, has ended. Not gradually, not theoretically. It has ended in the satellite imagery of burning Israeli infrastructure and in the tracking data of 2 American carriers accelerating westward from a Mediterranean they had patrolled without challenge for a generation. The decisions made in the weeks ahead in Washington, in Tel Aviv, in Tehran, in Moscow, and in Beijing will determine whether the transition to the order that replaces it produces something more stable or something more dangerous. Drop your assessment in the comments. Share this with everyone who needs to understand what actually happened. Subscribe to US Command Analysis. The next chapter is already being written.